The first time they laughed at him, he was just 6 years old, skinny, ash-kneed, and standing in line for free lunch with shoes 2 sizes too big. The other kids called him Bummy King, because his hand-me-down hoodie always slid off one shoulder and he carried a book bag patched with duct tape. But Jamal never cried. He'd just clench his fists, stare at the concrete, and whisper something only he could hear, "One day." That phrase, "one day," carried him through the darkest corners of the projects, where sirens sang louder than lullabies and dreams died quietly between eviction notices and gunshots. Jamal's mom, Miss Renee, worked double shifts at a nursing home, doing everything to keep him out of the streets. But the streets? They had a way of finding kids like him. Still, Jamal didn't jump into the game like most did. He started small, selling used sneakers he'd scrubbed clean with a toothbrush, flipping them on a busted Instagram page using Wi-Fi stolen from the corner bodega. People thought he was just hustling kicks. They didn't see the notebooks under his bed filled with names, prices, connections, and plans. By the time he turned 16, Jamal wasn't just selling sneakers. He was running drop-offs for older guys who trusted his silence more than they trusted their own boys. But he didn't want to be a corner boy. He wanted the whole board. And in a city where power changed hands with bullets or betrayal, Jamal played chess while everyone else was still learning checkers. People started calling him Kid Crown. Not just because of his rise, but because he wore it like he was born for it, head high, shoulders back, gold chain shining over plain tees. He didn't flash it. He built schools in the same blocks he used to duck bullets in. He paid rent for grandmothers. Fed kids during school holidays. But under the hood of all that good was an engine built on street money. A billion-dollar pipeline that fed from the shadows and flowed right through his fingertips. But power never comes without enemies. And the higher he climbed, the more ghosts followed. Some were boys he once broke bread with. Some wore badges. Others wore grins and carried knives in their words. Jamal had made it, but the boy who used to whisper one day now found himself whispering, "Watch your back." Then came the night. The night everything was supposed to change. Jamal had just sealed the deal that would make him the youngest underground king in city history. The paperwork was locked. The transfer was clean. And by sunrise, every major pipeline from uptown to the docks would be stamped with his mark. But sunrise came, and Jamal didn't. No messages. No sightings. No body. Just silence. Some said he got clipped by someone inside his own circle. Others whispered he ran, finally realizing the monster he'd built was swallowing him whole. His empire, though still standing, slowly fractured. Blocks that once chanted his name turned cold. Murals faded. Legends turned to rumors. Years passed. Then, one rainy afternoon, a black SUV pulled up to a youth center in the middle of the same neighborhood Jamal once ruled. Out stepped a man, older, calm, wearing a plain suit, no jewelry, no noise. The kids didn't recognize him. But the older heads, they froze. Because it was him. Jamal. Back from nowhere. But he wasn't there to take his throne back. He was there to tear it down. And what he did next would shake the whole city to its knees. So why did Jamal disappear? Where had he been? And why return just to destroy everything he built? The streets had crowned him king. But now, he'd returned as something else entirely. When Jamal walked through those community center doors, the air shifted. Some of the staff thought he was just a donor, another suit coming in to cut a check and pose for pictures. But he didn't smile. He didn't even introduce himself. He just walked straight to the back, where a bunch of young boys were throwing punches at each other in a dusty boxing ring. He leaned against the ropes and watched silently, eyes locked on a skinny kid in the corner who reminded him too much of himself. That same fire. That same anger trying to break out of a tired little body. Nobody knew how to ask the question that burned on everyone's tongue: where the hell had he been? He didn't owe anyone answers. At least, that's what he told himself. But inside, Jamal knew, some things had to be faced. Not for them. For him. The ghosts, the blood, the betrayal. It all started years ago, long before the throne, before the fame, before the city whispered his name like a prayer and a warning. Back when he was just Jamal. It started with the betrayal. There had always been whispers around him. Not everyone liked how fast he rose, how clean he kept things. In a world built on chaos, Jamal brought order. That made him dangerous. One of his closest friends, Dre, had been with him from the beginning, back when they were both sleeping in the same abandoned unit, eating canned beans and dreaming out loud. But as Jamal built his empire with strategy and silence, Dre wanted noise. Wanted power now. And when Jamal chose structure over chaos, Dre made a choice too, one that would set off a chain of betrayals that tore everything apart. Jamal never saw it coming. On the night of the takeover, Dre disappeared first. Then the money started moving in ways Jamal didn't authorize. Phones went dead. Drops were missed. And when Jamal showed up to the rooftop where he was supposed to sign the final deal, his right-hand man, Kilo, didn't show either. That rooftop was supposed to crown him king. Instead, it became a graveyard of trust. By morning, Jamal was gone. But not dead. He'd seen the signs just early enough. And when it came down to it, Jamal didn't run out of fear. He left out of survival. He went underground, really underground. No cell. No social media. No trail. He watched the city crumble from a distance as the empire he built started to feed on itself. For years, he drifted. One city to another. A ghost with no past. But the guilt followed him like a shadow. Every kid that got caught in the crossfire. Every mother who lost a son to a system he helped create. He kept seeing their faces. In train windows. In mirrors. In his sleep. That's when he knew, if he ever came back, it wouldn't be to rule. It'd be to rebuild. But rebuilding a city that once worshipped you like a god and cursed you like a devil? That wasn't something you could do with money. It had to start from the dirt. From the kids. From the ones still holding onto broken dreams and duct-taped book bags. That's why he came back to that youth center. He didn't say his name. Didn't ask for thanks. He just got to work. Fixing leaky pipes. Replacing light bulbs. Mopping floors. Quiet work. Humble work. The kind of work that earns respect, not demands it. But not everyone was happy he was back. In the corners of the city, old enemies stirred. Some still blamed him for brothers buried too young. Others feared he'd take back what he once controlled. And then there were those who knew the truth about what happened on that rooftop, and would kill to keep it buried. Jamal didn't care about the throne anymore. But the city did. And whether he wanted to or not, his return had triggered something. The game was waking up. And this time, it wasn't just about who ruled. It was about who would survive. The rumors spread fast. Kid Crown is back. They said it in barbershops, in back alleys, in police precincts. Some said it like a threat. Others said it with hope, like maybe the city could be saved, or burned clean. But Jamal didn't care about the noise. He kept his head down, hands busy, like he could scrub his past away with every floor he mopped. Still, the past has a funny way of knocking when you least expect it. It started small. A kid got jumped outside the youth center. Nothing major, just some punks trying to make a name. But Jamal saw the boy's eyes. The fear. The shame. It was the same look he had all those years ago when the world seemed to laugh at his pain. That's when he knew, this wasn't just about mentoring or community service. The streets still had a grip on these kids. And whoever was running them now didn't care about rules or reason. Meanwhile, Dre had filled the vacuum Jamal left behind. He didn't inherit the empire, he took it. Brick by brick. Ruthless, flashy, loud. Where Jamal had moved in shadows, Dre lit up the night with parties, muscle, and fear. He wasn't building a legacy. He was proving a point. And he didn't like ghosts showing up in his rearview. Find him, Dre told his people. I want to look him in the eyes. But Jamal wasn't hiding. He was watching. Through back channels and silent friends, he kept tabs on Dre's moves. The city was on edge. New players were rising, trigger-happy kids with no code, just clout. And worse? The cops had changed too. A new task force had been formed, the Crown Initiative. Their mission? Crush what was left of Jamal's old network and anyone tied to it. That meant innocent people were getting swept up. Mothers. Teenagers. Ex-workers who had long gone legit. Jamal's past was punishing people who never even cashed in on it. Then came the letter. No name. Just a slip of paper shoved under the youth center's door. You left something behind. Meet me at the old train yard. Midnight. Jamal stared at it for a long time. He knew what it meant. Someone from the old days. Someone who hadn't forgotten. That night, he showed up. The place was quiet. Empty tracks. Rusted fences. Rain dripping through broken roofing. Then a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Kilo. Thinner now. Eyes tired. But still sharp. I should kill you, he said. Jamal didn't flinch. I know, he said. But you won't. Kilo looked him over. You think you can just come back and play savior? Dre owns everything now. The blocks. The ports. The cops. They don't fear you anymore. I'm not here to be feared, Jamal said quietly. I'm here to clean it up. Kilo laughed, bitter and broken. You built it, man. Don't act like you didn't know what it would become. I built rules, Jamal said. Boundaries. Structure. That's what kept the wolves from tearing this city apart. Kilo stepped closer. And now you think you can just put it back in a box? No, Jamal said. But I can burn the box down. They stood in silence, the rain tapping metal like a slow heartbeat. Then Kilo nodded. I got something you need to see. What he showed Jamal next would change everything. Old surveillance footage. Paper trails. Deals made under Jamal's name after he disappeared, deals he never approved. And worse, proof that Dre had ties with the Crown Initiative. The same task force hunting down Jamal's people was actually working with Dre behind the scenes. The whole city was being played, and nobody knew it. Jamal's return wasn't just stirring up the streets. It was threatening a system built on secrets. And someone was watching closely, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Because Jamal hadn't just returned to a broken city. He'd stepped into a trap. And this time, getting out wouldn't be as simple as disappearing. The city pulsed like a heartbeat on the edge of breaking. Jamal moved quietly, piecing together every thread, every lie, every betrayal tied to the empire he once ruled. The deeper he dug, the more rotten it smelled. Dre hadn't just hijacked the streets, he'd built his kingdom on blackmail, payoffs, and fear. And now, with the cops in his pocket and the Crown Initiative cleaning up the rest, there were barely any corners left untouched. Jamal's name had become a ghost story, a warning whispered to kids who dared to ask too many questions. But Jamal wasn't just asking questions. He was preparing something. He started reconnecting with old allies, the ones who hadn't sold out or vanished. Tasha, the one-time safe house runner who now ran a community kitchen. Rico, a former muscle now pushing books instead of bricks. And even Bones, the lookout kid who used to whistle from rooftops and now worked security in a church basement. Quiet people. Smart people. People who owed Jamal nothing but remembered who he used to be. "We gonna war with Dre?" Rico asked, voice low. "No," Jamal said. "We make the truth louder than him. Then we let the city choose." But it wasn't that simple. Dre wasn't just fighting to keep power, he was scared. He knew Jamal's return meant something deeper. And scared men make dangerous moves. So Dre struck first. One night, the youth center caught fire. They said it was faulty wiring, but Jamal had already seen the gas can tucked behind the storage closet. He stood across the street, watching flames claw through the roof like angry fingers. Kids' backpacks. Old trophies. Family photos hung on the walls. All gone. Jamal didn't cry. But his hands curled tight like they used to when he was 6. That was Dre's message, stay gone. Jamal had one of his people slip a flash drive into the mailbox of a local reporter, someone with a reputation for being hard to buy. Inside was everything Kilo had shown him, records of fake raids, silent payments, and crooked deals signed in invisible ink. The reporter called 2 days later. "You realize what this is, right?" she asked. "This could blow the lid off the whole task force." Jamal just said, "It's not about me anymore. It's about the city." But before the story could run, the reporter disappeared. Gone. No message. No trace. And now the tension wasn't just street level. It was bigger. Deeper. A system protecting itself, burying anything that could shake its foundation. Jamal realized then, this wasn't just about him and Dre. This was a war for the soul of the city. The kind of war fought in backrooms and basements, not just corners and alleyways. Then one night, Tasha didn't answer her phone. Jamal drove straight to her place. The door was open. Lights off. Kitchen chair knocked over. No blood. No struggle. Just silence. And on the table, a burner phone. One number. No message. He called it. Dre answered. "You built this kingdom, King," Dre said coldly. "Now come watch it fall." The line went dead. Jamal stood there, jaw tight, eyes scanning every shadow. The trap was closing. He knew what Dre wanted, an ending. A spectacle. One last move to erase Jamal's name for good. And maybe part of Jamal wanted it too. To face it. To end it. Not just for revenge, but for peace. But this time, he wasn't walking in alone. He gathered the few who still believed. The ones who had scars from the old days and refused to let the city die without a fight. They had no army. No weapons cache. Just truth. Loyalty. And the hunger to see justice, no matter the cost. Jamal looked out over the city one last time, the skyline lit up like a burning promise. Somewhere out there, Dre was waiting. So were the cops. So were the ghosts. Everything was about to come to a head. Because sometimes, to rebuild something right, you have to burn down what's still standing. And Jamal was ready to light the match. The night before the confrontation, Jamal sat alone in the back room of the same church basement where Bones worked security. It was quiet except for the hum of an old refrigerator and the slow drip of a leaky pipe. He stared at the burner phone Dre had left him. One number. No call back. No trace. Just the cold silence of unfinished business. But then, just past midnight, Bones came in, eyes wide, out of breath. "Yo, you need to see this." He handed Jamal a crumpled photo. Jamal looked at it. For a moment, his heart stopped. It was Tasha. But she wasn't tied up or beaten. She wasn't even in hiding. She was standing beside Dre. Smiling. Laughing. Jamal couldn't speak. "Man," Bones said carefully, "you think she flipped?" Jamal didn't want to believe it. Tasha had been one of the few he trusted, really trusted. She knew his moves, his fears, even his plans to expose Dre. But there she was, in a surveillance photo dated 2 days ago. The same day she went missing. Betrayal, again. It cut deeper this time. Was it money? Fear? Or something worse? Jamal said nothing. He just folded the photo and put it in his pocket. His mind was racing. If Tasha had flipped, then Dre knew everything. The plans. The players. Even the reporter. Suddenly, everything made sense. The raid that didn't happen. The missing files. The burner phone left so conveniently behind. It wasn't just a trap. It was a setup from the start. And Jamal was already inside it. By morning, the city was on edge. Anonymous tips flooded police lines. A warehouse fire near the port. 2 drive-bys in neighborhoods that had been quiet for weeks. It felt random, but Jamal knew it wasn't. Dre was shaking the board, creating chaos before the real play. Then came the news broadcast. Live feed. Breaking story. A press conference with the head of the Crown Initiative. Standing right beside him, was Dre. Smiling. In a tailored suit. Holding up a city resolution. They were announcing a new program to clean up the city, safe streets for the next generation. The irony hit Jamal like a punch to the chest. Dre had turned his entire vision, community centers, youth programs, safe zones, into a media stunt. Painted himself as the savior. A reformed man giving back. And nobody in power was questioning it. The mayor nodded beside him. Cameras flashed. People clapped. Jamal's name wasn't mentioned once. It was like he never existed. Except in the streets. There, he was still a legend. Still a name whispered in stairwells and back alleys. But that wouldn't be enough. Not anymore. Not against this. Dre had done more than hijack the empire. He'd hijacked the truth. And now he was rewriting history, making Jamal the villain without ever saying his name. Jamal knew the next step had to be bigger. Riskier. It couldn't just be about proving Dre dirty. It had to expose the whole system. The cops. The fake reforms. The fake unity. And that's when Kilo called. Breathing heavy. Panicked. "They got Rico," he said. Snatched him off the street. Jamal froze. "They're not gonna let you live long enough to make your move, bro. You've got one shot. Tomorrow night. The old train station. I got the last piece." Jamal tightened his grip on the phone. The old train station. Where it all started. Where it all nearly ended. And now, it would all come full circle. But what Kilo didn't know, and what Jamal hadn't told anyone, was that someone else had reached out to him earlier that day. An old face. Someone Jamal had believed dead. Someone with a deeper tie to all of this than even Dre. And that person had one warning. Dre's not the real enemy. You've been fighting the wrong war. Now Jamal didn't know what to believe. Was Dre just a puppet? Had all this time, his rise, his fall, his return, been controlled by hands even darker than he imagined? The train station was no longer just a final meeting spot. It was the edge of something much bigger. And Jamal was about to step into it, not knowing who he could trust. Or who would make it out alive? The train station was silent, soaked in moonlight and memory. Rust clung to the rails like forgotten pain, and the old station clock hadn't moved in years, frozen in time, just like Jamal had been since he walked away from it all. He arrived alone, hoodie pulled low, steps slow, but every muscle alert. In his pocket, he carried a flash drive, the real one. Not the decoy Dre thought he'd intercepted. On it was everything: recordings, bank transfers, deals signed under fake names. Not just Dre's corruption, but the higher-ups. The judges. The cops. Even 2 politicians. This wasn't just street business anymore. He saw Kilo first, standing under the flickering light by the ticket booth, eyes scanning the shadows. "You sure you weren't followed?" Jamal asked. Kilo nodded. "I've been running streets longer than most of these kids been alive." Then came footsteps. Crisp. Confident. Dre. No crew. No guns. Just him. But the smirk on his face said he thought he'd already won. "Look at this," Dre said, arms out like a preacher. Full circle. The station. The king. And the traitor. He glanced at Kilo, who didn't flinch. "I know about Tasha," Jamal said. "You used her." Dre chuckled. "Used? No, man. She chose." He tossed a folded piece of paper to Jamal. A note, Tasha's handwriting. "I did what I had to do. For my son. I hope you understand." Jamal's jaw tightened. Her son. Dre must have found him. Threatened him. "This what you do now?" Jamal said. "Turn kids into pawns? Burn the city just to build your name on the ashes?" "I built what you couldn't," Dre snapped. "You had the crown and gave it up. I took it. Made it something real. Something permanent." Jamal stepped forward. "You made it poison." Suddenly, a click echoed behind them. From the darkness stepped 2 men in tactical gear, faces hidden. They raised rifles. Not aimed at Jamal. At Dre. "What is this?" Dre barked, stepping back. The 2 men didn't speak. But Kilo did. "They're not with me," he said, voice shaking. "I thought they were yours." More figures emerged, quiet, efficient. Jamal recognized one of them from an old surveillance photo tied to the Crown Initiative. But he wasn't wearing a badge tonight. Then another figure stepped forward, out of the shadows. Jamal froze. It was Malik, his older brother. The one he thought was killed in a raid over a decade ago. Alive. Changed. Wearing the insignia of a covert task force. "I told you, Jamal," Malik said, eyes cold. "You were fighting the wrong war." Jamal's voice cracked. "How?" Mom buried an empty box. They needed me gone. Off the record. I was recruited, trained, and then put in deep. Watching everything. Even you." Jamal staggered back. "So all this time." "I tried to protect you," Malik said. "But then you built something dangerous. And when you left, Dre filled that space. He was useful at first. Then greedy. Now he's a liability." Dre stepped forward, hands up. "This is insane. I helped you people. And now you're done," Malik said coldly. The men raised their rifles again. Jamal stepped between them. "No. No more blood." Malik looked at him, surprised. "You always said I had a choice," Jamal said. "Well, I'm choosing. We do this the right way. I have evidence. Real names. Real files. We leak it. We burn the rot out, not down. Silence held the air like a trigger waiting to snap. Then Malik nodded slowly. "All right. Let's see what the truth does." The rifles lowered. Dre stood there, breathing hard. "You think this saves you? You think people want truth? They want power. Fear. Flash. You're still that broke kid from the projects." Jamal walked up to him, close enough to feel the heat in Dre's words. "Maybe," he said. "But that kid just took your whole kingdom with nothing but truth." In the days that followed, the files hit every major news outlet. The Crown Initiative was exposed. Politicians resigned. Dre was arrested, but it wasn't a headline, he was just a piece in something bigger. Tasha and her son were relocated, safe. Kilo disappeared, again. And Jamal? He vanished too. Some say he left the country. Others say he walks the streets still, quiet, watching. But one night, a mural appeared in the city center, painted in the colors of fire and hope. It read, "The crown was never the power. The people are." And no one ever laughed at that kid again. Weeks passed after the truth came to light, and the city began to breathe differently. The grip that Dre had held on the streets slowly loosened, and with it, the fear that had once seeped into every corner, every conversation, faded away. People went back to their neighborhoods, the ones that had been abandoned, left in ruin, but this time with a sense of hope they hadn't felt in years. The power structures that had profited off the city's darkness crumbled, and though the scars remained, there was a collective effort to rebuild. It wasn't perfect, but it was something real. For Jamal, it was enough. He never showed his face again in public, never returned to the city that had raised him, only to abandon him at his lowest. But his mark was left, stronger than any empire Dre had built. The mural was still there, vivid in its defiance. It wasn't just art. It was a movement. A statement that people didn't need to wait for someone in power to give them permission to change their own lives. Jamal had made sure of that. He didn't have a crown, or an army, or a city full of followers. But he had the truth, and sometimes, that was enough to break the chains. People who had once seen him as nothing more than a kid from the projects now looked at him as a symbol, proof that anyone, no matter where they came from, could rise and make a difference. He hadn't been the king of the city. But in the end, the city had become the king of itself. Malik's role in the whole operation stayed a secret, at least to the public. No one ever really understood the full scope of what had been happening behind the scenes, how far-reaching the corruption had gone. The covert task force continued its work, making sure no other Dre-like figures could rise to fill the void. They worked quietly, efficiently, and most importantly, from the shadows. They couldn't afford to make the same mistakes again. But for Malik, there was peace in knowing his younger brother had seen the light. Jamal never asked for forgiveness, and he didn't need it. He wasn't the same person who had walked away from the streets all those years ago, the person who had thought revenge was his only path forward. What he did ask for, though, was redemption, for himself and for the people who had been left in the wake of the empire Dre had built. The fight had never been about getting the city back or taking down Dre, it was about giving people the power to choose their own fate. Kilo stayed on the streets, disappearing when things got too hot, reappearing when the tension calmed. He had never been in it for glory, just survival. He stayed close to the people, making sure the truth lived on even as time passed. It was his way of honoring the sacrifice that Jamal had made, even if Jamal would never know the full extent of what it meant. In the end, the streets weren't a place of dominance, they were a place of redemption, of healing. Tasha's life had changed, too. After everything came to light, she disappeared into the background, taking her son with her. She had made her choices, and though she had done what she had to do to protect her family, she found peace in knowing that the streets were safer now. There was nothing left for her in the chaos. She found a quiet corner of the world where she could rebuild, far from the shadow of Dre's empire. She never spoke to Jamal again, but she didn't need to. She knew he understood. The media covered Dre's downfall extensively, but the focus eventually shifted away from him. What they didn't know was that the real story wasn't about the fall of one man, but the rise of an entire city. The stories of individuals taking power, making choices, and fighting for what was right became the headline. Years later, the mural still stood. It had faded, but the words remained sharp: the crown was never the power. The people are. People gathered around it, taking pictures, remembering the revolution of hope that had sparked in their own hearts. Children who had grown up in the shadow of the old empire were now creating their own futures, no longer bound by the chains of fear that once kept them silent. And Jamal? No one ever saw him again. Maybe he had left the city for good. Or maybe he was out there somewhere, still watching, still waiting. But wherever he was, he knew he had done what no one else could have. He had shattered the illusion of power and reminded the world that even the most broken places could heal. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption, finding strength in the hardest of times, and trusting that the people, when given the chance, could rise above anything. The crown wasn't something to wear. It was something to give away. And Jamal had given it away, so the city could finally wear it for itself.